7 minutes after a white millionaire called Martin Luther King's mother the N-word, the same man would be standing in the same room, voice cracking, trying to take the word back, while everyone watched, frozen, realizing it wasn't an apology they were about to witness, but a public collapse because the way King answered wasn't loud, wasn't angry, and didn't sound like a fight at first, yet it forced the richest person in the room to turn on himself in front of 14 witnesses who had been sure money could protect him from shame. The room carried the soft confidence of wealth, heavy curtains, low lamps that warmed faces, furniture arranged in a circle that felt casual but placed the right people closest to the center. Conversations floated in controlled tones. Legislation, timing, public perception. The kind of words that sounded neutral until you remembered who they were meant to slow down. Martin Luther King Jr. stood near the far end, listening more than speaking, hands loosely folded, his posture calm enough to look like distance, though it wasn't. Beside him sat his mother, older, dignified, composed, dressed simply compared to the room, and yet somehow she made everyone else look like they were trying too hard. She had barely spoken since arriving, not out of fear, but out of a quiet certainty that she did not need to compete for space. The millionaire arrived late. He entered as if punctuality was for other people. His name carried weight here because it was attached to donations, connections, and an influence that didn't need to raise its voice. He greeted men by last name only, smiled without warmth, accepted a drink he didn't touch, and listened with the bored patience of someone who believed he'd already won whatever argument was coming. The discussion turned inevitably to protests and pressure. Someone suggested patience. Someone else said gradual. The millionaire made a small sound, half laugh, half insult, and finally looked toward King's mother. It wasn't rage. It wasn't even open hatred. It was something colder, the casual certainty of a man who had spent his life saying what he wanted and watching rooms stay quiet. He said the N-word, not shouted, not whispered, just placed into the room like a coin dropped on a table, meant to prove ownership. A chair creaked. A glass touched wood too hard. One man stared at the floor as if he'd lost something there. Another adjusted his cuff like he'd suddenly remembered an appointment. No one corrected him. No one interrupted. Silence moved through the room faster than courage ever does, and in that silence the millionaire felt protected. King did not move. He didn't step forward. He didn't flinch. He didn't even turn his head immediately. His mother remained still, her hands resting calmly, her face giving nothing away. If pain appeared, it was only as a slight tightening around the eyes, the kind of restraint that comes from a lifetime of being forced to swallow what should never have been served. The millionaire took the lack of reaction as permission and kept talking, explaining himself, which is what men like him do when they want cruelty to sound like reason. He spoke about reality. He spoke about order. He spoke about how the country couldn't be held hostage by emotions, how some people should learn their place, how everyone in the room knew what he meant, even if they pretended not to. Then King finally lifted his gaze, not to the millionaire at first, to the room. He looked at the faces, one by one, without accusation, without pleading, as if he were taking attendance. 14 people, 14 witnesses, 14 chances for someone else to do the right thing, so he wouldn't have to carry it alone. And yet the room stayed quiet, because everyone understood the millionaire's power, and everyone weighed the cost of disagreement, and everyone decided, without a vote, that the cost was too high. That was when the conflict truly began, not with the word itself, but with the choice the room made afterward. King took a slow breath, the kind that steadies you before you lift something heavy. And when he spoke, his voice was so calm, people leaned forward without realizing they had done it. He didn't say racism. He didn't say insult. He didn't say my mother. He asked a simple question instead, soft, almost polite, yet sharp enough to cut through the comfort everyone had been hiding behind. And for the first time that night, the millionaire hesitated because he realized this wasn't going to be a scene he could buy his way out of. And the next 7 minutes would make every person in that room understand exactly what their silence had cost. The question was so simple that for a second it sounded like small talk, the kind of thing said at a dinner party to keep the air light. Yet it landed with a weight that made the room go even quieter, because it didn't attack the millionaire. It didn't defend anyone. It just demanded an answer that couldn't be bought. King looked at him and asked almost gently, "Do you have a mother?" A few people blinked as if they hadn't heard correctly. They expected anger, a sermon, a warning. They expected a fight they could later describe as unfortunate, something both sides should have handled better. Instead, they got a calm voice and a question a child could ask. The millionaire let out a short laugh, the kind men use when they fill the room with them. "Of course I do," he said, and he tried to smile as if the whole thing was beneath him. King nodded slowly, not approving, not conceding, just acknowledging. Then he asked, "And when you speak about people's mothers, do you believe words disappear because you can afford to say them?" The smile twitched. The millionaire glanced around the circle, searching for a friendly face, someone ready to rescue him with a joke, a subject change, a cough. No one moved, not because they were brave, but because they were curious now, and curiosity is the one thing that can hold powerful people still. "You're turning this into drama," the millionaire said, voice sharpening, and the word drama was his first shield, because if he could make this sound emotional, he could make it sound childish. "We're discussing the reality of this country." "Good," King replied quietly. "Then let's stay with reality." He glanced briefly at his mother. She didn't look back at the millionaire. She looked past him, beyond the room, as if she had lived through 100 versions of this moment and knew none of them were worth her surprise. King turned back. "Tell me," he said, "when you said that word to her, what did you want from her?" The room tightened. A chair creaked. Someone's ring tapped a glass. The millionaire opened his mouth, then closed it, because the question had corners, and any answer would reveal him. "What do you mean?" he snapped, irritation rising like heat under a lid. King's voice stayed even. "Did you want her to feel small? Did you want the room to laugh? Did you want me to lose control so you could call me dangerous? Or did you just want to remind everyone here that you can say anything and nobody will stop you?" The millionaire's nostrils flared. "You're making assumptions." "I'm asking," King corrected gently, and the gentleness made it worse, because it left no place to hide behind outrage. "And I'm asking in front of the people who heard you." That line pulled the witnesses into the story. It made their silence visible. The millionaire turned to the circle, trying to bring them back under his wing. "This is exactly what I mean," he said louder now. "You can't speak honestly without being accused. Everything becomes about feelings." A couple of heads nodded, small, embarrassed nods, and King saw them not with contempt, but with the calm memory of a man who keeps track of who stands where when the air turns cold. "Is it honest?" King asked. "To insult a mother?" "It's a word," the millionaire said. "A word. You people give it power." You people landed like a second blow. Someone inhaled sharply, a quick betrayed breath. King didn't react. He simply repeated the millionaire's sentence back to him, slowly, like a mirror. "It's a word," King said, "and you say we give it power." He stepped a half step forward, not aggressively, just enough to bring the millionaire into focus. "Then if the word has no power," King asked, "why did you choose that one?" The millionaire's jaw tightened. He tried to answer fast to escape the trap. "Because it's accurate," he said, and the moment the word left his mouth, he realized what he'd done. The room shifted again. This wasn't a joke. This wasn't a misunderstanding. It was belief, spoken out loud where consequences could finally reach it. King nodded once. "Accurate," he repeated. "So in your reality, my mother is less than you." "That's not what I said," the millionaire barked. "It's what your word means," King replied, still quiet. "And I want you to hear it the way she heard it." He turned to the room, not pleading, not accusing, just stating a fact with his eyes. "Did anyone here hear something different?" No one answered. Not because they agreed, because they were terrified of being first. King let the silence breathe. Then he looked back at the millionaire. Not like an enemy, but like a man who could still be reached. "Sir," King said softly, "you have money, influence, and people who laugh when you're cruel because they want your favor. But I need to know one thing before I say anything else tonight. He paused long enough for the room to lean in. Do you want to be right, King asked, or do you want to be decent? The millionaire opened his mouth. No sound came out, because that question wasn't about politics anymore. It was about what the next 7 minutes would do to his name, right there, in front of 14 witnesses. The millionaire's silence lasted only a second, but in that second the room saw what money couldn't hide. He had never practiced answering questions like that, not questions that didn't ask for his opinion, not questions that asked for his character. And when he forced a laugh, it sounded thin, like paper dragged over a blade. Decent, he repeated, turning the word into a joke. You want a fairy tale where everyone changes because you ask nicely. I don't want fairy tales, King said. I want clarity. The millionaire took a small sip, then let his eyes slide toward King's mother again, as if he needed to remind himself who the target was, as if her silence still felt like victory. She's tough, he shrugged. She's lived through worse than a word. I didn't harm her. I didn't touch her. It was honest. There it was. Honest. The word men use when they want cruelty to sound like courage. King nodded slowly. So honesty is your shield. The millionaire leaned into it, sensing the room might return to him. Exactly. People like you demand everyone tiptoe. You want us to pretend we don't see differences. But we do. And if we're going to fix anything, we have to speak plainly. A couple of men looked relieved, as if he'd opened a safe door back to comfort. Someone even made a quiet approving sound, quickly swallowed. Plainly, King repeated. Then let's speak plainly. He looked at the millionaire again. When you said that word, you said it to a mother. The millionaire rolled his eyes. Here we go. I want you to tell me, King continued, calm as a judge, what you believe a mother is. The question landed oddly. Not political, not legal, something older. A mother is a mother, the millionaire said, annoyed. A woman who raises a child. Raises him how? King asked. With discipline, with values, with structure, the millionaire replied fast, eager to end this detour. And when that child grows, King said, does he owe her respect? Of course. And if he humiliates her in front of strangers, King continued, voice steady, what kind of man is he? The millionaire hesitated. The room didn't move. No laughter came to save him. What kind of man? King asked again, softer. Ungrateful, the millionaire muttered. King nodded as if that single word was a key. Ungrateful. Then he asked the question that shifted the temperature. Does your mother deserve respect because she is your mother, or because she is valuable? The millionaire blinked. What kind of question is that? A simple one, King said. If your mother were poor, would she deserve less respect? A chair scraped near the window. Someone cleared their throat too loudly. The millionaire's jaw flexed, irritated that the conversation had crossed into something personal. My mother is not poor, he said coldly. I didn't ask what she is, King replied. I asked what you believe. The millionaire stared, then tried to retake control with speed. Fine. Everyone deserves a basic level of respect, but respect is earned too. And let's not pretend your people haven't. Your people slipped out again, easy and practiced. King didn't pounce. He let it hang, because the room heard it now, and once a room hears something clearly, it can't unhear it. And who decides what is earned? King asked. You. Society decides, the millionaire snapped. Reality decides. King nodded. Reality. He took a slow step toward the center, not aggressive, just enough to make the room feel like it had to pay attention. Then let's test your reality, he said quietly. In this room. He turned slightly to the witnesses, not accusing them, only pulling them into the light. Is the value of a mother measured by her bank account? King asked. No one answered. Not because they didn't know, because answering would make them responsible. King looked back at the millionaire. You said the word because you believed you could, he said. Because you believed nobody here would challenge you. That's not true, the millionaire snapped, face reddening. Then challenge yourself, King said, almost gently. The millionaire frowned. What? King's voice stayed soft. Say it again, he said. Say it again right now, in front of 14 people, and tell us it's just a word. A shock moved through the room. Hands froze over glasses. Eyes widened. Even King's mother lifted her gaze slightly. Not to the millionaire, but to the silence, as if she were watching whether the room would finally choose differently. The millionaire's throat worked. Nothing came out, because this was the trap. If it was harmless, he could repeat it. If it was honesty, he could own it twice. But he couldn't. King didn't press him with volume. He pressed him with stillness. Either it's harmless, King said softly, or it's poison. And for the first time that night, the room didn't feel like it belonged to the richest man anymore. The millionaire tried to smile his way out of it, but the smile wouldn't hold, because a room can forgive cruelty when it's comfortable, yet it struggles to forgive cowardice when it's exposed, and right now he wasn't a powerful man anymore. He was a man who had thrown a stone and suddenly realized everyone could see his hand. "This is absurd," he muttered, forcing air through his nose, as if disgust could substitute for confidence. "You're playing games." King didn't react to the insult. He didn't even correct the tone. He simply looked at him the way you look at someone who has missed something obvious and expensive. "I'm not playing," King said. "I'm asking you to decide what kind of man you are while there are witnesses." The word witnesses didn't sound like a threat in King's mouth. It sounded like a responsibility, and responsibility is exactly what the room had been avoiding. The millionaire's gaze darted toward the circle. He wanted an ally. He wanted laughter. He wanted anyone to say, "Let's move on." But what he saw in their faces wasn't support anymore. It was calculation. They were measuring the moment, sensing it might become costly in ways money couldn't quickly fix. King took a slow breath. Then he shifted, almost imperceptibly, from questioning to something else. Not a speech yet, not fire, more like a door opening. "My mother has sat in rooms like this before," King said, voice low, steady, controlled. Rooms where men who never cleaned a floor believed they were clean because they wore suits. Rooms where comfort was treated like proof of virtue. The millionaire stiffened at the implication, but King didn't look at him. He looked at the air, as if he were speaking to something larger than one man's ego. "She raised me," King continued, "with the same hands that held me when I was small, and with the same voice that corrected me when I was wrong. And I learned early that a man's greatness is not in what he can say, but in what he refuses to say when the crowd gives him permission." He paused. The room stayed perfectly still. "You said that word," King said, "because you thought it would put her beneath you." The millionaire opened his mouth, ready to deny it, but King lifted a hand, not as a command, simply as a gentle request for silence, and somehow it worked. That was the strange thing about real authority. It didn't need volume. King turned his head slightly toward the witnesses. "Let me ask you all something," he said. "Not about politics, not about strategy, about truth." Several people blinked. A couple shifted in their seats as if truth were a draft they hadn't prepared for. King continued, "There is a verse that says a man's tongue can set a forest on fire, not because words are flames, but because words reveal what we keep hidden. And when a man uses a word meant to degrade, he is not describing someone else. He is describing himself." The millionaire's face tightened. He whispered half to himself, "Jesus." King heard it and didn't pounce on it. He let it live. "Another verse says we will be judged for every idle word," King added, and he let that sentence settle like dust on expensive furniture. "Not because God is cruel, but because words are evidence. They tell us what we truly believe when we think no one will challenge us." He finally looked directly at the millionaire again. "Sir," King said softly, "you told yourself it was just a word, but you couldn't say it twice. That means you know it carries poison." The millionaire's jaw flexed. "I'm not afraid of a word," he snapped. King nodded. "Then you're afraid of what the word says about you." A murmur moved through the room, small, uncertain. One man's eyes dropped. Another's lips parted, as if he wanted to speak, then closed again. King didn't rush. He didn't force an emotional peak. He built it the way you build pressure. Steady, unavoidable. "Here is the part people get wrong," King said. "They think racism is loud. They think it wears a hood. But often it wears a watch worth more than a family's home, and it speaks softly, and it calls itself honest. The millionaire swallowed. And the room, King continued, helps it, not by cheering, by staying quiet. The words hit the witnesses like a cold splash. Several faces hardened defensively, because no one likes being reminded that silence is a choice. King's tone stayed calm. If you think you're innocent because you didn't say it, ask yourself why you didn't stop it. A woman near the back shifted her hands together tightly. A man near the fireplace stared at the floor again, as if the floor had answers. King looked back to the millionaire. You asked for reality, he said. Here it is. If you can degrade a mother in public, you can degrade anyone when you believe they can't fight back. The millionaire tried to scoff, but the sound didn't form. And now, King said, you have two roads. He held up two fingers briefly, not dramatic, just clear. One road is pride. You keep your word. You own it. You prove to everyone here that money has turned your heart to stone. The millionaire's nostrils flared. The other road is harder, King said. You admit you were wrong. Not because you were forced, not because it looks better, not because you fear consequences, but because you want to remain human. The room felt smaller. The air felt heavier. Even the lamps seemed too warm, like they were exposing more than light. King leaned forward slightly, voice quiet enough that everyone had to listen. I'm not asking you to bow to me, he said. I'm asking you to stand up to yourself. The millionaire's hands tightened around his glass, knuckles pale, and for the first time, his eyes flicked toward King's mother, not with contempt, not with amusement, but with something new and unwanted, awareness. And the 7 minutes weren't over yet. The millionaire's first instinct was to attack the frame, because he could feel it closing around him. And men like him survive by controlling the story, not by admitting they were wrong. So he tried to turn King's words into theater, tried to make it seem like this was performance and manipulation. You're good, he said, forcing a chuckle that nobody returned. You know how to speak. You know how to make people feel something. But feeling isn't policy. King didn't argue. He simply waited. And the waiting made the millionaire keep talking, because silence now felt dangerous. You act like I'm the villain because I said a word, the millionaire continued, voice rising. A word? Meanwhile, the world is out there the way it is. You want change? Fine. But don't pretend your side hasn't. He stopped, because he was reaching for a comparison that would make his cruelty look normal, and he couldn't find one that worked in this room anymore. Then a man, older, heavy-set, the kind who always spoke last, cleared his throat. That's enough, he said quietly. The millionaire snapped toward him. Excuse me? You crossed a line, the man replied, steady. And you know you did. The millionaire looked around, waiting for someone to restore the hierarchy, to laugh, to smooth it over. No one did. A woman with pearls spoke next, voice tight. It was unnecessary, she said, like that word could sanitize the moment. It didn't help anything. The millionaire blinked. This was new. He was used to rooms that defended him automatically. He turned to King, anger sharpening into something desperate. So this is your trick, he said. You turn people against me and stand there like a saint. King's voice stayed low. I didn't turn anyone against you. You did that when you decided your comfort mattered more than her dignity. Dignity, the millionaire spat, mocking it. You think dignity changes reality? King answered without lifting his tone. No, dignity changes men. And men change reality. It landed cleanly and several faces shifted, as if they'd been struck by something they couldn't argue with. The millionaire tried another escape. Money. You all know who I am, he said to the witnesses. You know what I've done. The institutions I've funded. The doors I've opened. I've helped plenty of... He caught himself, hearing how the old language sounded now. I've helped plenty of people. I'm not some monster. No one answered. The older man near the fireplace said quieter. Helping doesn't give you permission to humiliate. The millionaire's grip tightened around his glass. So now I'm on trial, he snapped, and he hated that his voice cracked, hated that weakness had slipped into it. King didn't say yes. He didn't say no. He said something worse. You're not on trial, King replied. You're being seen. A hush fell. Being seen is what powerful men fear when they've built themselves on image. The millionaire tried to laugh again, but the sound came out broken. His eyes flicked toward King's mother, then away, as if looking at her too directly might make the shame real. King's mother remained composed, not cold, not dramatic, simply present, like a fact that wouldn't bend. The millionaire's voice dropped. "What do you want?" he asked, and for the first time it sounded like an actual question, not a weapon. King didn't answer quickly. He let the room feel the shift, the moment arrogance becomes uncertainty. "I want you to understand," King said softly, "that the word you used was never about her. It was about what you needed to feel in that moment. Superior, safe, untouchable." The millionaire's eyes flashed. "You don't know what I need." King nodded. "Then tell us." The witnesses leaned in without meaning to. They weren't watching a debate anymore. They were watching a man confront himself in public. The millionaire's throat worked. His breathing grew uneven. He searched the circle for the old safety of agreement and found none, because even those who still liked him didn't want to be tied to that word now. He whispered almost to himself, "I didn't mean." King held his gaze. "Finish it." The millionaire swallowed hard. "I didn't mean it like that," he said louder, as if volume could repair logic. King's response came instantly, quiet and sharp. "Then how did you mean it?" The millionaire froze, because there was no clean version of that word. No version that didn't point to the same belief. And the room knew it. His shoulders sagged a fraction, the first visible crack in the armor, and he stared down at his own hands as if they belonged to someone else. Somewhere in the room, a clock ticked loudly enough to feel like accusation. And everyone understood. If an apology came, it would not be graceful. It would be ugly, reluctant, and painfully human. The room waited the way a courtroom waits, not because anyone had declared a verdict, but because everyone could feel something irreversible had already happened. And the only question left was whether the millionaire would climb down with what little dignity he had left, or cling to pride until it strangled him. He stared at his hands, then lifted his head too quickly, as if sudden movement could shake the shame off. "This is," he began and stopped, because he didn't even know what lie to choose anymore. King didn't rush him. He didn't fill the silence. He simply stood there, calm, and in that calm the millionaire could hear his own breath, uneven, exposed. The witnesses stayed still because they had become addicted to the truth they'd been avoiding. "I said a word," the millionaire forced out, voice tight, "and you're making it sound like I'm—" He couldn't finish. Calling himself a monster would be too honest. Denying it would be too stupid. King's mother sat quietly, posture unchanged. She demanded nothing from him. No rage, no tears, no forgiveness. And that absence of demand stripped away his last excuse, because he could no longer pretend he was reacting to her emotion. He was reacting to his own reflection. King spoke softly. "You don't have to be a monster to do monstrous things. You only have to believe you're untouchable." The millionaire flinched at untouchable. He looked around for rescue. Someone to laugh, someone to say, "We all understand what you meant." What he found was distance. Even the men who still wanted his favor didn't want to be tied to that word now. His voice cracked. "I didn't think," he said, and the sentence sounded like a confession and an excuse at once. He swallowed, angry at himself. "I'm used to speaking freely. I'm used to rooms where people understand the difference between a word and a crusade." "A word can be a crusade," King replied quietly, "if it's the banner you carry into someone else's life." The woman with pearls pressed her lips together. The older man by the fireplace stared at the floor. Nobody moved. The millionaire finally looked directly at King's mother, not at King, and something shifted in his eyes because he saw she wasn't begging him to be good. She was simply refusing to be small. He opened his mouth and tried to push out a polite exit. "If I offended you—" King's voice cut in, calm but firm. "No." The millionaire blinked. "Don't hide behind that sentence," King continued. "You didn't offend her. You tried to place her beneath you." The room tightened. The millionaire's jaw trembled with frustration because that gentle sentence removed the only door he knew. Half apology, full escape. He stared at King for a long second, then back at his mother, and finally something in him loosened. Not dramatic, not theatrical, just the nod of pride giving way under pressure. "I was wrong," he said abruptly. The room stiffened. He swallowed and repeated it, louder. "I was wrong." He looked down again, then forced himself to keep going, because stopping now would look like cowardice. And for the first time he understood there was something worse than humiliation, being remembered as a man who couldn't face his own words. "I use that word," he said, voice shaking, "because I wanted the room to know I could, because I wanted to feel above it, above all of it." That confession was uglier than a polished apology. It was honest. He lifted his eyes to King's mother. "I take it back," he said. "Completely. I had no right." His voice cracked on right. King's mother held his gaze, calm and unblinking. And then, without drama, she gave the smallest nod. Not forgiveness, not comfort, just acknowledgement that he had finally told the truth. The millionaire exhaled as if he'd been holding his breath for years, and then the room finally began to speak. The older man near the fireplace said, "That should have happened sooner." A younger advisor snapped, "At least he said it. Most never do." The woman with pearls shook her head. "Saying it doesn't erase it." Another man, defensive, muttered, "This is why people don't talk anymore. One mistake and you're crucified." The older man turned sharply. "That wasn't a mistake. That was a choice." Voices overlapped. They argued. Not about policy, not about strategy, but about what silence means, what money excuses, what an apology can and cannot repair. Some wanted to close the evening like a ledger and move on. Others couldn't unsee themselves in the quiet. King didn't raise his voice to control them. He didn't need to. He looked at the millionaire and said one final sentence, soft and steady. "Now you know your words are not weightless." And for the first time, the richest man in the room understood the one thing he couldn't buy: the cost of being seen.